Welcome to the English Vault. Today we follow Puss in Boots into a bright little adventure about courage, quick thinking, and the surprising power of a very clever cat. This is a story for anyone who has ever felt small, ignored, or unsure how to begin. It is also a story about a strange kind of confidence, the kind that does not need muscles, money, or a crown. Sometimes it begins with a hat, a pair of boots, and one brave idea. At the start, there is no palace. There is no treasure map. There is only a young man with almost nothing, and a cat who looks at the world as if every closed door is simply waiting for the right knock. Chapter 1. The Small Inheritance. A miller had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his things behind. The oldest son received the mill. The second son received the donkey. The youngest son received the cat. The youngest son looked at the cat and felt his heart fall. A mill could make flour. A donkey could carry heavy bags. But a cat? A cat could catch mice, sleep in the sun, and walk away whenever he wanted. The young man thought his future had become very small. He imagined hunger, hard days, and people laughing at him. He did not see a path forward. He only saw an ending. But the cat was not an ordinary cat. He listened. He watched. Then he spoke with calm confidence, as if the whole problem had already been solved. "Give me a pair of boots," the cat said, "and a bag. Then let me do the rest." The young man did not understand. Still, when you have almost nothing, even a strange plan can feel better than no plan at all. So he found boots for the cat and gave him a bag. The cat stood up proudly. He was small, but he walked like a gentleman. He had no sword, no army, and no money. What he had was attention. He noticed what others missed. He knew that a good plan begins with seeing the world clearly. Chapter 2. A Gift for the King. Puss in Boots went into the fields with his bag. He moved quietly and patiently. Soon he caught a rabbit, but instead of eating it, he carried it to the king's palace. At the palace gate, he did not act like a poor animal asking for help. He acted like an important messenger. He bowed politely and said the rabbit was a gift from his master, the Marquis of Carabas. Of course, there was no Marquis of Carabas. The young man had no title at all. But Puss understood something powerful. People often listen differently when a story sounds important. The king accepted the gift. A few days later, Puss brought another gift. Then another. Each time he said the gift came from the Marquis of Carabas. Slowly, the name began to live inside the king's mind. The king did not know the young man. He had never seen his house, but he knew the name. And sometimes, in the world of power, a remembered name is the first open door. Puss did not use force. He used timing, manners, and imagination. He was careful, polite, and bold. He understood that courage is not always loud. Sometimes courage is walking into a room where you do not belong yet, and speaking as if you have a reason to be there. Back at home, the young man still felt confused. He saw only a cat returning from trips. He did not yet see the road being built under his feet. Chapter 3. The River Plan. One day, Puss learned that the king and his daughter would ride near the river. This was his chance. He told the young man to bathe in the water and trust him. The young man was nervous. The plan made no sense. But by now he had seen enough to know that the cat's ideas often looked strange before they worked. When the royal carriage came close, Puss began to shout, "Help! Help! The Marquis of Carabas is in danger!" The king remembered that name. He stopped the carriage. His servants ran to help. Puss explained that thieves had stolen his master's clothes while he was swimming. The king ordered fine clothes to be brought. When the young man stepped out dressed like a nobleman, he looked different. He stood taller. People treated him differently because he appeared different. This is one of the playful lessons of the tale. Clothes do not make a person better, but confidence changes how a person moves. When someone is treated with dignity, he may begin to remember that he has dignity. The princess saw the young man and smiled. The king invited him into the carriage. Suddenly, the boy who had started with only a cat was riding beside royalty. But Puss knew the adventure was not finished. A costume can open a door, but it cannot build a future. To make the story last, he needed one more daring step. Chapter 4. Fields, Fear, and Fast Thinking. Puss ran ahead of the royal carriage. He came to fields where workers were cutting grain. The fields belonged to a powerful ogre, but Puss had no time for fear. When he reached the workers, he spoke quickly. "If the king asks who owns these fields, say they belong to the Marquis of Carabas. If you do not, there may be trouble." The workers were frightened and confused, but when the royal carriage arrived, they answered just as Puss had told them. "These fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas," they said. The king looked impressed. The young man looked surprised. Puss kept running. Again and again, the same thing happened. More fields, more workers, more answers. Each answer made the young man seem richer and more important. Now, in a real-life lesson, we should not admire lies. But as a story, this moment is about invention, speed, and the difference between feeling trapped and finding a way forward. Puss lives inside a fairy tale world, where cleverness becomes a kind of magic. He is not the strongest creature in the kingdom. He cannot lift a tree or fight a giant. But he can read a moment. He can make people believe a possibility before it becomes real. The carriage kept moving. The king kept seeing more signs of greatness. The young man sat quietly, realizing that his life was changing faster than he could understand. And ahead of them all, Puss finally reached the place where the real danger waited. Chapter 5. The Ogre's Castle. The castle belonged to an ogre who was rich, proud, and dangerous. People said he could change his shape. He could become a lion, an elephant, or any creature he wished. Puss entered the castle with perfect politeness. He did not tremble. He complimented the ogre and spoke with curious respect. The ogre enjoyed being admired. Proud people often do. Puss asked if the stories were true. Could the ogre really become a huge animal? The ogre smiled and changed into a lion. For a moment, Puss was terrified. A lion is not a small problem for a cat in boots. But fear did not stop his mind. He stepped back, praised the ogre, and then asked a smaller question. "It is easy to become something large," Puss said. "But could you become something tiny? Could you become a mouse?" The ogre laughed. Of course he could. In an instant, he became a mouse. Puss did what cats do. The danger was over. Soon after, the king's carriage arrived at the castle. Puss welcomed everyone and presented the beautiful castle as the home of the Marquis of Carabas. The king was amazed. The princess was delighted. The young man could hardly believe what he saw. The cat had taken a poor beginning, a risky road and a terrible castle, and turned them into a new life. Not with darkness, not with cruelty, with nerve, timing, and a little fairy tale mischief. Chapter 6. More Than Clever Tricks. In the end, the young man married the princess, and Puss in Boots became a great lord. He no longer needed to hunt mice unless he wanted to. It is a funny ending, but it carries a warm idea. Sometimes the thing you receive looks useless at first. A small chance, a strange friend, a simple tool, a pair of boots. But if you look again, that small thing may become the beginning of your path. Puss teaches courage with a smile. He does not wait until he is powerful to act powerful. He does not wait until the road is safe to begin walking. He uses what he has: words, manners, speed, and imagination. For the young man, the lesson is different. He learns that despair can be too quick. When he received the cat, he believed his story was over. But his story had not ended. It had only become stranger. That is why this tale still feels alive. It reminds us that hope does not always enter like a hero on a horse. Sometimes hope walks in quietly, wearing boots that are too fancy, and says, "Trust me." And maybe that is the real magic of Puss in Boots. He shows that confidence can be learned. A new identity can begin before the world believes it. And a small voice, used at the right moment, can change the size of a life. The adventure also reminds us that cleverness works best when it is connected to purpose. Puss is playful, but he is not lazy. He pays attention, moves quickly, and turns each small moment into the next step. For a learner, the story is easy to follow because every action leads to another action. A cat asks for boots. He brings gifts. He creates a name. He opens a path. The simple chain makes the adventure feel bright and clear. And behind the humor, there is a kind message. Do not decide too early that your beginning is too small. Many good stories begin with less than people expect. This was another story from the English Vault. Keep listening, keep imagining, and keep walking toward the next open door. I will see you in the next one.